Go.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Writer Mother Monster. I just realized if you've joined us live that the intro video still has a previous guest's name, which is embarrassing, but I'd like to welcome Jessica Pierce this evening. That is, in fact, our guest, Jessica Pierce. Poet Jessica Pierce is the author of Consider the Body Winged and has been published in numerous magazines, including Nimrod International Journal, which selected her as a finalist for the 2020 and 2021 Pablo Neruda Prize for Poetry. She was also a finalist in poetry prizes from CALYX Journal, the New Ohio Review, and Martha's Vineyard Institute of Creative Writing, where she was also a fellow. Jessica earned her master's in education from Harvard and works in a large public school district in Oregon to create anti-racist alternatives to exclusionary discipline. She has 2 children and describes writer motherhood in 3 words as "fuck the patriarchy." Now, please join me in welcoming Jessica. Hi.
Thank you. It's always so good to hear that. It's always so good to hear "fuck the patriarchy."
It is, and I love that those were your 3 words to describe writer motherhood. So let's start there. Fuck the patriarchy.
Yeah, I mean, as we chatted about a little bit in, like, when we were getting ready, motherhood is can be such a nourishing, nurturing journey, and it's so tied to these white supremacist and patriarchal structures and tropes that suck the breath out of people. And I think trying to figure out how to break that down while taking care of all of your parts, right? Your heart, your soul, your spirit, your mind, your body. And then you have these creatures who came into the world, and you're in some way, shape, or form responsible for them somehow, and also they're their own independent humans. Oh no, it's just a fuck ton. It's a lot.
It is. Oh, I can't wait to get into that. Tell us about your children. So you have 2 kids.
I have 2 kiddos. So my youngest kiddo is 7.5 and is a 2nd grader and uses he, him pronouns. And then my oldest kiddo is almost 11, and it's his golden birthday. So 11 on March 11. And also uses he, him pronouns and has been on a journey, which is not my story to tell, but is definitely part of my own mother experience. Yeah,
absolutely.
So they're creative, they're funny, they're sassy, swear a lot in my house. They don't swear at school, so far as I know, which is great to be able to navigate different spaces. They generally don't swear around their grandparents. It's also solid boundaries. And I learn a lot from them about staying curious and staying observant and listening to the world and trying not to get too trapped in existential distress.
Yeah, well, that's very easy to become trapped in these days, I think.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm finding, so my daughter's 5.5, and she's picking up on existential stress right now. Like, she learned about Martin Luther King in school and now is convinced someone will come and assassinate her, which trying to navigate just these big complex ideas with very small children is so complicated. Do you find that is it more difficult or less difficult as your kids get older to grapple with those big issues and as they start to kind of maybe understand them a little bit better?
I think it's just different degrees of complexity. Sorry, it's not going to get easier. All right, got it. Can't sell you a load of bullshit. I mean, I think I've always worked really hard to have transparent, honest conversations with my kids about white supremacy and racism and patriarchy and heteronormativity. And I mean, all of that is evolving as my own learning evolves and as I grow as a human. And I've also really, I will be honest, I've really dialed back the conversations about kind of the ongoing news grind. I just found during the pandemic, my kids were with the radio on in the background, even NPR or other like more progressive news. It was just so much. And I was just watching them try to hold all this while in a space that like really developmentally kids should not be around adults as much as they were during the pandemic. Like that's deeply fucked up. Like kids need kids. And so I just made a really conscious decision for my own mental health and for their mental health to really focus on local. And so now we talk more about local school board elections and local city council elections, and we do organizing around that. And I'm in a union. It's red for Ed today. What? Collectivism. Right. And that's really been, I think, I'm not sure what your experience will be like with your kiddo, but for my kiddos, it's been a lot about like, how do we find strength through community? And how do we find strength through organizing? And there's so many different ways to do that. And it doesn't always mean a march, although sometimes it does. It doesn't look one way, except that it looks like connection, right? And it looks like deep communal care. But in order to do that, you also have to take good care of yourself. So just kind of like, how do we talk about and maintain that loop? I don't know how that resonates with you. I'm curious.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so interested in this. And I hadn't really thought about it, to be honest. Like, I think you and I were talking a little bit beforehand about just the daily craziness of day-to-day life. Mm-hmm. And there hasn't been, well, I shouldn't say there hasn't been room, because there could be if I prioritized it, but I haven't prioritized local news and community and activism, possibly in part because we moved to the area where we now live just before the pandemic, and then everything shut down. So it's new to us now that my daughter is in kindergarten to be part of a school and part of a community where we now own a home and are putting down roots. So that to me is a fascinating approach to engaging with the world while not being overwhelmed by it, or while trying not to be overwhelmed by it. I love that.
Yeah, and I think the overwhelm is legit, right? And super important to name and to acknowledge. Mm-hmm. And the people that I work with amazing humans. I'm an educator, right? Rocking the public school life. I get to teach in the community where my kids go to school. When you think about like rootedness, but my people, like we do we're working on a staff lingo bingo, and my lingo, I say both and a lot. They're like, oh, but that's a both and. What if we don't, let's reject the binary everywhere, right? And so like overwhelm, yes. And what comes along with that? What opportunities are there in that for, for nurturing? I think about that a lot, like nourishing and nurturing. As opposed to depletion. And I have a spiritual director who is an amazing human. We spend a lot of time like building things with sticks and like dancing, drawing. And she asked me these questions when I started seeing her last fall. She said, what nourishes you and what depletes you? And I don't know if this resonates with you, that I kind of like came the next week and I was like, well, I did my homework and like I have a list. And she was like, no, I'm not ready. I'm not going to talk about this with you yet. You need to sit with this for a while. And you need to think about what nourishes and depletes your body and your soul and your mind and your heart and all the parts again. And I was like, do I get an A? Nope, that's not what this is about. Okay.
Oh, I would totally do that too. Actually, as you said that, I was like, what nourishes? I was trying to make a checklist in my head. And sadly, I was like, I can't think of anything. So maybe I need to do that myself.
They are questions I come back to a lot. So first of all, I super appreciate that she checked my shit. A new frame for me is that I'm a recovering perfectionist. And so I'm really trying to let go of that quest for something completely unattainable and also totally toxic. And so the nourishing and depleting, and it's part of an embodiment practice, right? Like how do we as mothers also like come back into our bodies? And it's hard because there are these beings who at various points may need certain kinds of nourishment from our bodies, depending on how that relationship works. But like we're whole fucking humans, all ourselves. Mm-hmm. And it's all of course tied to like bodies and how we treat bodies not as people, but it just to live that out as a mother and to then have other humans only see you as like a delivery mechanism for someone else's survival is really harmful. And I'm not here for that shit.
Yeah, back to fuck the patriarchy, right?
Yeah, fuck it. Right. And then of course, I'm like deeply committed, like this is deeply intersectional, right? And so like you can't say fuck the patriarchy without saying fuck white supremacy. You gotta say, and then you can throw capitalism in, like the trifecta of awful. Because they really are like the heads, the Gorgon heads, right? Yep. Oh, Rosanna Warren, if you are listening to this, I am tapping into freshman mythology just for you, Rosanna Warren. But like the Gorgon heads, right? Like, and you think about the way in which these three dehumanizing systems just like try to crush humans, like how do you reject that? And you can reject it in small ways with your kid. You can reject it in small ways with your partners, with your friends, with the people you are in community with nature, right? Like an ecological view of social justice is really, I think, deeply empowering.
Absolutely. Oh, there's so much to unpack there, but let's go back to nourishment.
I don't come in hard today. I've got like, I'm so stoked to be talking about this with you. This is so great.
This is wonderful. Yeah, and actually for listeners who heard Rosanna Warren, Jessica and I both came from the same undergrad program where Rosanna Warren was a professor, and she appeared on the show. I don't remember which episode.
I knew this.
Yes, right. Yeah. So listeners, go back and find the Rosanna Warren episode. You'll know what we're talking about. Brilliant woman.
Rosanna. Brilliant. So brilliant.
Yes. Nourishment. Okay, so let's go back to nourishment. What nourishes you? So how do you answer that question these days?
Yeah. I think there's some things that are really tangible, like a cup of tea, like things that are made by other humans that are beautiful. Like this mug is a handmade mug, and I just love being connected to other people's art and creative expression. Play. I find play, like with my kids and my friends, to be so nourishing, and laughing. Oh, I just can't give enough gratitude for laughing. It saves my life innumerable times a day. Especially as I'm navigating a divorce, which I'm also glad to talk about on the show, because I think that's a really important part for some mothers' journeys, is what does it mean to become a solo parent, which is not the same thing as a single parent. Like there is another human who's connected to my kiddos who is present in some way. But I am a solo parent like 85% of the time, which then brings me more back to nourishment, right? Like how do I really take care of my whole self? Poetry always, right? Yeah. Poetry is just like so fundamentally nourishing to me. Writing it, reading it, rolling around in it.
How does the nourishment of writing and reading poetry interact with your recovering perfectionist?
Oh, I appreciate that question. Yeah. I think what I've found, especially since beginning a divorce from a human who took up a lot of space, is actually how much space I want my writing life to take up. And that I'm very much right now, after publishing a book, moving into a new stage of creation again, right? Because all the poems that are in here are never going to go out into the world again. They're not going to journals anymore. Like this is where they live. This is their home. And so I have found that I don't have the energy right now for revision, but whoa, do I have creative energy. And I have my 11 by 17 journal right next to the sink in my bathroom, and I'm writing in it almost every day. I wrote a poem a day in January. I was going to do it 365 days, and I was like, yeah, this is a little extra. I was like Ross Gaying it a little bit, like I'm going to write my essays on delights every day. And I was like, nah, Ross Gay can have that. I love you, Ross Gay, but I don't need to be Ross Gay. I'll just be Jessica. It's cool.
There you go.
Yeah. So I think the nourishment comes from letting myself have that freedom to just whatever feels authentic, whatever poem is coming through me, and to not filter it and to not try to make it anything else except for what it is. And that maybe ultimately is maybe nourishment is like letting it just be what it is. Yeah. And just like soaking up that being. And sometimes that means being with other humans, right? Being super present with another person, emotionally, physically, right? That's so beautiful. Being present with my own being and my own body. Like giving myself hand massages these days, I'm like all about it. I'm like, this is great. I'm gonna rub my hands all day. my friend gave me this flaxseed hug. It's like a little weighted thing and you warm it up. And I just like have it everywhere right now. Kelly, I hope you're watching this or listen to it. Kelly gave it to me. The Kelly hug. So all of those things, I think it's trying to nourish all of my parts and try not to leave any of it behind. I don't want to leave any of my parts behind.
I love this. And it's such a good reminder to me and to anyone out there listening to be conscious of nourishment and depletion. And I think that's so valuable, especially these days with so much happening, like you said, in the world and in our lives. But back to poetry for a second and that sense of play. It sounds like the way you're describing letting the words just come out and, letting it come through you. How is that connected, if at all, to your enjoyment of play?
Oh, yeah. I think not having a plan and just being able to, again, coming back to being present in the moment. And my kids are really playful humans, even though my oldest is adolescenting hard, so hard. Whoa. But still has this deeply playful spirit under all that adolescent angst and rebellion. And so I think that has been, and to find ways to play during a divorce and to find ways to play during a pandemic and to find ways to play during uprisings for justice and wars, right? And that's not to dismiss any of that, right? That's real. That's a part of the human condition and it's hard and it's not to make excuses for it and ignore it. But I don't know, we're complex creatures and I don't know. I don't ever want to be someone who lets go of play. That's just not, I tried. It didn't work out well. So I'm never going to do that again. Fuck that noise.
Yeah. When did you try?
I think kind of in the midst of my 30s, there was some really heavy life stuff happening in my family and in my work life. And I kind of went into that hyper perfectionist mode. And there's no play in perfectionism. There isn't. It's just, it's so narrow and so constricting. And every time I wanted to play, I felt guilty about it, and guilt and shame and that sound. And I think coming out of that in my 40s, I just turned 42, and to really be able to say, I'm gonna fucking manifest some play and joy. But part of that also comes back to, I think, being really honest when I am depleted and not pretending. And I think that's the other thing about maybe motherhood and writing and all of this is you can't be a full person if you're pretending that everything's okay. Yeah. You can't.
Yeah. Let's talk about motherhood and at least sometimes the urge to pretend that everything's okay. I know I have that.
Yeah. Hey, little human.
Sorry, just a moment, friends.
No worries. Do your thing. Mine are going to be rolling in real noisy in the next 10 minutes.
And he actually got freeze shooter.
That is so cool.
Freeze shooter.
I'm the freeze shooter.
Okay, stay down with Tanya. I'm doing my show. Can you close the door?
I'm going to freeze you.
She did not close the door. I'm going to close the door.
Super duper didn't. I'm going to let my dog in. We'll both leave the screen together for just a moment. It's all good.
We had a friend in the comments on YouTube ask if we were live. Yes, if one wasn't sure whether we were live or not. There we go.
We're super live.
We're super live. So that was my daughter who interrupted us. She's playing video games with her uncle, who I don't think knew to keep her downstairs. So
little feedback about that for next time. Well, that's my dog. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, all the friends this evening.
Oh my gosh, so many.
Yeah. What were we talking about? Okay, so we were talking about pretending everything's okay to your kids, and why is that a bad idea or a good idea? Nothing's right or wrong, but how do you do it?
Right. I think that is I think there's so many layers to this, because I also really believe deeply in like letting children be children, right? And so it's not about lying to them, but it's also about like they need adults to adults. And I feel real about that. And like my face gets, this is like my former like dean of students face, where I'm like, let kids be kids. Put your grown-up pants on, right? And so I think it's a balance, or maybe harmony. One of my favorite therapists, Nedra Tawwab, writes amazing stuff about boundaries. Strongly encourage everybody to read her book and follow her on everything. And she talks about harmony as opposed to balance. And I like that also because I think it takes into account multiplicity. And balance, again, still kind of brings us back to a binary perspective. So we think about harmony around being honest, but not honest to the point where you turn your kids into your confidants, or you try to adultify them. Like, that's so dangerous and so harmful. And so, which comes back to then, how are you in community with other humans so that your kids don't, like, you don't need to be the gravitational center of their world. In fact, you shouldn't be. It's not good for them and it's not good for you. So how are you keeping your village strong and connected so that your kids have multiple perspectives on the world to reflect on, so that you have a range of humans you trust to confide in and to discuss and to sit in silence with and to laugh with? And it comes back to that collectivism and community. So I don't know if that really answers the question, but I just think, I think that's where it's at for pretty much everything.
No, I love how we keep coming back to this as a through line, and it's so valuable. It's coming back again to that sense of local activism and local perspective. And I love the distinction between harmony and balance. I think that's so helpful. And there's a question I came into this podcast asking was, how do you find balance in your life, like between all of these things, right? And every writer I've had on has said, there is no such thing as balance, or if there is, I haven't found it. So I love the way various guests have reframed that question. And I love your use of the word harmony instead of balance. So that's right in line, I think, with what we're trying to do, the whole fuck the patriarchy thing, right? Balance is a patriarchal white supremacist concept.
Yeah, it really, like, because again, it's this idea that you kind of have to be weighing everything all the time, and one thing against another, and harmony really speaks. I mean, my hands, just this, right? This is harmony. It's more about interplay and interconnection. And when we look again, like from an ecological perspective, like, an ecosystem isn't about balance necessarily. There's too many pieces for it to be about balance. It's more about harmony and kind of readjusting and reciprocity in various ways, and different seasons bring about different needs. And then how do you shift and adjust to that? And so I'm thinking about there's so much beautiful writing about this braiding sweetgrass, which I know a lot of folks out there probably spent some time with, but just what an amazing collection of ponderings on justice and nature and humans. It's just, that speaks to me as a writer and a mother and a human.
Absolutely. And speaking of poetry that is in harmony with all of these things, maybe this is a good moment for you to read a poem.
Sure. Yeah. I have, on the cover of my book is a wasp, because I have a number of poems scattered through the book that are about various wasps and bees, most of whom live in matrilineal matriarchal societies, which I'm all about. And those are my humans. I'm going to mute myself for a moment so I can remind them I'm doing this and that I'm about to read a poem.
Okay.
I'll be with you.
Yes, please do. Short pause.
Okay.
Here we are.
We're gonna try this.
Okay. I'm going to solo you here, so
okay.
Go for it.
So this is not an insect poem, but this is about postpartum depression, which is a variant postpartum anxiety, which I know a lot of folks out there have experienced or may still be experiencing. Oh, Jax, come here. Hey, be with me. The first time I give my 2 children a bath alone. My daughter, 3 years old, sturdy and brow furrowed. My son watching what I call light and shadow, but what he calls nothing because he is still counted in days. All I see is him slipping into the water, her staring at me with disdain. Raw nippled, I can push my fists deep into my soft belly and aching uterus. There are mothers who drive into lakes with their babies. I'm reading a poem online. I'll be right there. Mothers who jump out of windows with their babies. Mothers who walk out door after door without their babies. Mothers who send their babies in baskets down rivers to save their babies. Kneeling on the dolphin bath mat, my hands slipping on my baby boy's slick body. No one told me I could be one of those mothers. Because 4,500 blackbirds fall dead from the sky when fireworks explode. Oh, I'm reading a serious poem and I'm on the internet. I know. But there's a lot of people out there. I want you to keep your face to the side. Privacy for you. This is real life. Because salt rises from once fertile fields, and what used to make kings and queens brings me to tears as they survey all they've lost. Because scientists debate particles that could be faster than the speed of light and violate cause and effect. And all I want is to cover my face and the faces of my children with wings upon wings upon wings. A little bit of an unusual reading with the company that I have, so give me one moment.
You're fine. For anyone listening who, after the fact, who is not watching, Jessica's child has arrived and has sort of creeping through the background of the screen as she's reading her poem. So again, if you are listening as a podcast after the fact, go and check out the video at about 28 minutes and 10 seconds. It's pretty wonderful. And it shows us again that we are live. She'll be right back with us. There she is.
I'm back. Hi.
Hi.
Making sure we're all clear on where boundaries are right now.
No, we've had so many amazing interruptions, and they're always good. It's always a good thing because this is brighter motherhood, in actions.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you. That was beautiful and very powerful. And the fact that it continued to hold its power while a small person was creeping behind you, like going like this.
I know. God.
Says something about your
thank
race
you.
as a reader. So there you go.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So tell us, as an entry back into the conversation, tell us about that poem specifically.
Yeah. So I spent a lot of time just kind of reflecting on how quickly we judge mothers who hurt their children. Mm-hmm. And yes, like on a super visceral level, that's a terrible, terrifying thing to observe or to bear witness to in any way, shape, or form. And also, like, it's really hard, scary shit to be a parent. Yeah. And I had read years ago, it was in the Chicago Tribune, they did a narrative series on some women who had deep postpartum depression and who had jumped out of buildings with their children in their arms, right, and died by suicide. And I just think about those women all the time and what it must be like to be inside a mind and a body and a spirit and a soul and heart that are so deeply disconnected and so depleted that seems like the only option you have. Mm-hmm. And then I started thinking about all of the ways in which we judge women, femmes, mothers for walking away from their children. And then I was thinking about Moses being sent down the river and the idea that there's actually like salvation in that and not abandonment. And then where are all of the men in these stories? Where are the fathers in these stories? what the fuck are they doing? Right? And that is not to judge their dads, before you trip, right? Most of you are doing just fine. Right? And it is different. It is different. Just societally, the expectations are so different. And so I just wanted to hold some space and some grace and the recognition that I could be one of those mothers. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And to pretend I couldn't be would be that disingenuous depletion that I'm not here for that shit. Like those women were full humans.
Yeah.
And that's the choice and it's horrific. And also we could all do that.
Yeah. I mean, it's part of what we don't talk about. Well, there's so many parts of that we don't talk about, but postpartum depression and manic depression and abandonment and all of these things wrapped together is just villainizes women and mothers who are most in need of support. So thank you for putting voice to that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it makes me think, lately I've been thinking a lot of Rabbit Run. And, here's this like epic book about this guy who's feeling restless and unsatisfied and goes on this sort of like journey of not even self-discovery, but like, I don't know, wandering, I guess, while his wife is at home with their newborn. And at the end, well, hopefully I won't ruin it for anybody, but at the end, something tragic happens. And it's the one chapter from his wife's point of view. And it makes me think I'm so much more interested in that one last chapter where something tragic happens with the wife, where I believe it's been a while since I've read it, but you're supposed to read it, I think, in this sort of horrified state that like this woman is drinking too much and she isn't paying attention and an accident occurs. But like you said, where was the dad? He's just like off gallivanting, finding himself, and you're supposed to feel like bad for him that he's constrained by his fatherhood.
Right.
Right.
And so yet he's the one who's off, right? He's out the door. Oh, I think about this all the time. I've written so many poems about Penelope at home, weaving, and these fucking men lurking every which way. And Odysseus just rolls back in. He's like, hey, babe, cool, you're still here? Dope, right?
Totally.
I wrote a poem where she's like, anytime you want to leave again, that'd be great, right? Take all these assholes with you and just leave me alone. And then Natalie Diaz wrote, I just was double checking. She wrote a wonderful poem that was featured in on Poetry Unbound with Padre Gotuma, which is one of it's such a beautiful poetry podcast. That and Ada Limon is currently hosting The Slowdown, which is another beautiful poetry podcast. I really recommend both. And The Slowdown is like 5-minute episodes, give or take, and Poetry Unbound is typically 10 to 12 minutes. And Natalie Diaz wrote a poem about Lot's wife. And why did Lot's wife look back? And it's incredible. And so I think about that a lot when I write. I think about that a lot as a mother. And really, this is actually what I found why I wanted to get a divorce. I didn't have my own story anymore. And my voice and that relationship had just become so small and so demeaned and so diminished. And I'm bigger than that. And so reclaiming that and then finding even like this deeper voice, like, I don't know, it's like, whoa, there's a lot of power right in there, has been like the most liberating experience of my life.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. You said you were okay with talking about the divorce. And first of all, I can't imagine you being small and diminished. Like you just have this like bold, explosive presence. So do you have a sense of like why that happened? So had it always been like that from the beginning, or was it something that kind of happened through the course of a marriage?
That's I think about this a lot of therapy, conversations about this. I have definitely, I for all those folks who are listening who are like in sort of some healing space or looking for healing, yo, get your coven together. I got my acupuncturist. I got my massage therapist. Now I'm super lucky. I have union benefits. I'm able to like access some of this. There's tons of barriers to these like wellness and healing experiences. Totally understand that. But if you have access or are able to work in your community to dismantle barriers to make sure other people have access, get on that shit. And so my spiritual director, my therapist, and just an incredible group of humans who've navigated divorce in particular, learning a lot from them. And I think all of that has given me an opportunity to see, yes, I think it happened over time. I think it was deeply tied to my perfectionism and allowing myself to spread myself so thin that I put everybody else's needs first, including my ex's, including his art. And I put my art in a small little box and took it out sometimes and kind of put some work into the world. And I wrote, but it was very small and it was very contained. And that is not to say that is like his fault per se. This is not I'm not interested in a fault conversation about this. It's just the reality of how it evolved over time and when children came into the picture and all of that. And then really what in the end I think helped me, there were a few things that helped me understand I needed to leave my marriage. But this book, I started writing this book fall 2020. And my press, First Matter Press, approached me and said, here's this little First Matter Press, love you. They're collective, what? Non-hierarchical, what? Women and femmes, love it. And so they approached me and asked if I was interested in submitting a manuscript. They reviewed it, accepted it. And that journey of taking care of my voice. I've wanted to be a poet since I was 9 years old, and I dedicated this book to my 9-year-old self, right? So I'm going to read the dedication because this is, I think, coming back to my voice. Oh, Jax, my baby dog. For my 9-year-old self, thank you for being brave enough to say, I am a poet. Here's our first book. I love you.
I love that. Amazing.
That was like one of my favorite parts to write in my book. I could not wait to write that dedication. I was so excited. And I'm the oldest of 5. I come from Irish Catholic, French Canadian stock. There's a lot in there about self-sacrifice. There's a lot in there about you can't have wants, let alone, you can't have needs, let alone wants. Right? And so to sit with this book and craft it and dig through it and be in conversation with people, I was like, you're right, I do have a big voice. And I don't ever want to be small like that again. And there's no way in this relationship I can be my truest, most authentic self. There's just no way. It's not possible. And so, yeah, I think this book gave me a taste of freedom. And I'm super grateful to it for that.
That's amazing. That goes back again to writing as nourishment, poetry as nourishment.
Absolutely.
Tell me, so you said that when you were married, that you fit your work into a small box and took it out every so often and worked on it. But how have you found your writing, your poetry changing since taking it out of that box and freeing it?
Oh yeah, let's get into that. It's messier, and I've also found, and messier in the sense that I'm really letting myself tap into anger, my shame, my guilt, like all of that underbelly, and just letting myself feel all the motherfucking feels. And so that's been a huge part of what my second book is going to be. My second book's going to be fire. Can't wait. I mean, I'm enjoying taking care of this baby, but I really, my second book, I can just already feel it in terms of complexity and also in terms of letting each poem, now that I've seen what it's like for things to be in a book, not feeling like each poem has to hold everything and letting each poem be own vessel and not trying to seek resolution and not trying to package something up for a reader that will make them feel better or feel like assuaged or comforted in some sort of way. Because now that I've recognized how there can be an interplay and a conversation over the course of multiple poems, and it's not just one sitting in a journal, I now have a better understanding of the way in which there's just a multi-voice conversation. And I want to dig into that.
Yeah. Oh, I feel like this is a good moment to read another poem. And then I'm going to make a note of a question that I want to ask you when we come back. So let's have another poem.
Okay. Sounds good. Oh, Jackson. He's hungry. Okay. I close my eyes. A man and a woman. Jax, come here. Okay, I'm going to start that one again. I close my eyes. A man and a woman sit under this maple tree with us. There's plenty of room and more than enough diaphanous light. Heart-shaped seeds settle on their shoulders, in my lap, in my children's palms, and I can't help but think cathedral. Beneath our feet, roots tunnel and twine. And can trees ever be lonely with such a tangle of communion? The couple moves out into the sun, and I want them to love each other. My daughter chants, "Pretend you're dead, Mama, and then wake up and be so happy to see us." My son chimes in, "Pretend, Mama, pretend." I close my eyes to their alchemized faces. They count and pause and count and pause, and I know they're right there, still there, and I'm about to gasp, "Go faster," when "Open your eyes," they command. I've read enough stories to know that I should never ask for eternity, but I would lift up my heart to anything that would grant us light like forever under this tree. Thanks.
Amazing. Thank you. At some point, you'll have to look at the comments here in the chat. You're getting some love.
But I haven't even seen. Oh my gosh, there's a whole comments thing. Oh,
there's a whole comment.
My ADHD brain is like gonna get real pulled into that. I'm gonna look at that later. Yep. Whoop. Closing it.
But yes, you're getting some love. No, thank you for reading. So I don't want to impose anything on you, but I have a question for you that your musings on divorce and finding your powerful voice resonated with me. So you said that you're 42, so I'm 40. I just turned 40 last year. And in something about turning 40 made me, like, 30 was fine. Yep. 40 threw me for a loop. And I am happily married, I'm happily married, and I started thinking about, like, what else is out there, and what have I not experienced, and I never will experience, and how do I feel about that? And my writing feels safe in some ways, and I need to go messier and bolder, and I need to be louder, and I need to swear more, and, like, wear red lipstick. And, like, for a while I was like, is this a midlife crisis? And I talked to my therapist about it. You mentioned therapy, and yes, I'm an advocate for therapy. And the way she put it is, people use midlife crisis as kind of a cliche term, but what it really is taking stock and looking at the last 40 years and thinking ahead to the next 40 years. And you're in this, like, moment where you can look back and forward at the same time and think about where you're heading. So for me, turning 40 has this, like, this huge moment for my writing, for my marriage, for my motherhood. Was that part of it for you? You said in 2020 was when you began writing this book, right? So
I think so. Yeah, I turned 40 and I celebrated my 40th birthday a week before the shutdown here in Oregon with a big ass karaoke party. It was amazing. And we are currently trying to figure out, we want to do it again. So we're looking for it because we just want to sing in a room and like spit on each other's faces. Like sing Closer to Fun by Indigo Girls and anything else, Bohemian Rhapsody, but sing it loud, all the verses, every single one. And so I think 40 was also a year when I made a really big job move, which was not originally my idea. I was working as a dean, which is like maybe like an assistant principal kind of role. I was working pretty intense hours. I was feeling an incredible kind of emotional burden in that job, which I wasn't even that aware of, maybe because I've kind of been like life trained to do that. But as my therapist says, just because you can do something doesn't mean you need to. And so they cut the position. It was a district funding situation. So they cut the position. I went into total panic in 2019, spring of 2019, total panic. Like, oh my gosh, my life plan, I was going to become an administrator. I have my administrator license. I'm going to become a principal or a district administrator. And it all of a sudden seemed like everything had just closed down and I couldn't see another option, right? In terms of, you think about like, yeah, that tunnel vision. And luckily I work with amazing humans who helped me kind of create a new job, which I started fall 2019. And that job has given me an incredible space to be really a creative, imaginative person outside of the classroom, outside of carrying the stories of students and their traumatic experiences. And I just had found that I'm just such a sponge, and I would hold these stories and they would just like take up so much space in my being. And I couldn't be myself because I was just all of those stories instead. And so there was some liberation in there that allowed me to start to do some of the reflection you're talking about. And some of it was really hard. I had to really acknowledge a whole bunch of ways in which I had harmed myself. I have done a lot of acknowledging about the harm I've done in my job as a white lady in an administrative role and pushing Black and brown kids out of school. So as we're talking about wanting to like have anti-racist alternatives, like I participated in the racist status quo. Mm-hmm. And so there were layers of accountability, of communal accountability, of personal accountability, spiritual accountability, physical accountability. Like, how do I fucking live with this body? How can I love this body?
Yeah.
And so, 40, and it carried through. I mean, it was not a 1-year endeavor.
I'm finding that to be true as I approach.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so I really hear that, and I think it's important and courageous for you to be honest about that wondering and those questions and the what ifs, and then where does that lead you for the choices you make now, right? Because you have so many choices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's something we forget, I think, is that we do have choices, and this is the moment where we've established ourselves to some extent around like 40, right? Like we have a career path, we have a marriage, we have children, and so then in this midst of having established everything, it's like, well, if I move forward and make different choices, do I dismantle the things I've worked so hard to establish? And what does that mean?
Oh, yeah.
So
I was in my relationship for 17 years.
Oh, wow.
17 years, 15 years of marriage and 2 years before then. I started dating this person when I was 24 years old. Mm-hmm. What the actual fuck was I thinking? And so I hear that because yes, it was. I hit 40 and it was like, okay, I've got the marriage and I've got the 2 kids and we own a home and and this administrative track. And then all of a sudden it just was like, that's not what I want. Yeah. This is not what I want. Yeah. The kid part I'm keeping. I'm down with them. I like them. I'm going to keep them.
So what do you want from here?
No, I was just going to say, what I found I want to be my messy whole self in my writing, in my work life, in my parenting life, in my friendships, in whatever romantic relationships come my way, like with my family of origin. I'm messy and I'm going to take up space, and fuck it. Right?
Good for you. Yes.
Which is hard too, because then there's this part of me that's like, oh, careful. If you say fuck it too much, then people are going to be like, ooh, you're a problem. Or like, ooh, really? That's the direction you want to go? You're asking, got some feedback one point from somebody about like, shouldn't be asking so many hard questions. And I was like, I'm going to take that as a compliment. I'm glad I'm in a space in my life where I am asking hard questions.
In what realm was somebody saying you were asking too many hard questions?
little work feedback.
A work feedback? I feel like
luckily not for. I mean, it was yeah. I was like, like my eyebrows. We got real eyebrows.
Yeah.
But that's actually now in my 40s. That's the kind of feedback that I'm like, okay, I'm doing my job then. Like as a human, I'm doing my job of the humaning.
Yeah.
The gerund. Like it's a gerund until you're dead and then you're something else. But in the meantime, it's a gerund. And I think that's it. What I realize is I just want to be my fullest self in all the spaces. Yeah. I don't want any more constriction. I don't want it. Mm-hmm. And I don't want my kids to have that. Like that has become really abundantly clear to me is what do I want my kids to see from the life that I'm living and that they're alongside. And that's that I'm going to choose abundance over scarcity and that I'm going to choose connection over isolation and that I'm going to choose learning over the status quo and I'm going to choose nurturing over harming. You know, that's it. That's what I'm going to offer them and invite them into. And what they choose to do with that is up to them. But all I can do is invite and offer.
Yeah. Oh, I feel like that was the perfect moment to end. And we still have a few minutes left. So maybe we can
just sit and meditate. We can pretend thumb wrestle.
Yeah. I'm like, I don't know. That's like such a wonderful point to keep thinking about long past when we end, but why don't we end with a poem instead?
I was just about to say, can I read another poem?
Yeah, let's do another poem.
Okay. Oh, Jax, lovey. I'm waiting for my oldest kiddo to come feed the dog. This is part of life when you're like, I'm going to give my kid chores. And then you're like, for the love of God, when are you going to do your chores? God, am I going to do your chore? If I do your chore now, I'm like totally undermining you doing your chores. But the dog is also hungry and I'm trying to read a poem and this is hard.
You know, I will just give you some solidarity. The other day, I was trying to get my daughter dressed for school, and she had like half an hour till school was started. I was like, put your clothes on. She's almost 6. She knows how to put her clothes on. She's like, will you help me? And I was like, no, I can't help you. I have to feed the cat. I have to do this thing. So she sat there and just sat naked, waiting. And I was like, now I can't give in. I can't help her because I said she could do it herself. It took a half an hour. Tears, negotiation, all this stuff. Finally, she's like, will you put on one of my socks and I'll do the rest? Fine.
I'll give you a sock. Dude, that was a solid power move though on your daughter's behalf. Like she was like, I'm in my power.
Oh yes. Just sat there on her bedroom floor, butt naked. I was like, all right.
Naked power.
Don't know what to do with that. I gotta go to school in half an hour. But...
I adore your child.
Yeah.
And also totally empathize with the maddening nature of having a naked child who just will not put their clothes on.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
So real.
Admirable.
Yeah. Yeah. There's the both and again. There it is.
All right. Take us out with a poem.
I'm gonna read a poem that does not actually have my children in it. But I like the ending of this poem when I think about what I'm stepping into in this next decade of my life. And post-divorce and just kind of, continuing to find my fullest self. It has always been the end of times. Light curves, horizon brims, and a bird becomes a child, bending to something scattered and shattered. A man sobs on the shoulder of a woman, or is kissing her neck, or they are feathered and cast shadows from broken bits of earth. A chariot wheel crosses the sky, pulled by photons and bloody palms, and the mothers of gods and luminous bodies forever, for never, long enough. Stand still or don't. Name this the rotation of the celestial, or the final uncovering, or the heart when it comes upon the broad embrace of a calm, dark harbor. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you so much, Jessica. This was
Thanks
just
for
such a pleasure.
being here. Oh my gosh, what a treat. And what a treat. And Laura mentioned this, but we knew each other back when Laura was 18, 19, and I was 19, 20, chilling in a brownstone on Bay State Road in Boston.
Mhm.
And so it's just such a treat to be back together. And you're doing such great work. And it's just been this has been very nourishing. So thank you.
Thank you. No, I feel the same. I know. I would love to have you back on. So the second book, the
anytime.
like big, bold, messy book, we're gonna have you back on, and we're gonna talk about that
I'm here.
book. Okay.
That sounds great.
Thank you so much, Jessica.
Oh, thank you,
and
Laura.
we'll see you again in
Yep.
a year or two, right?
Okay. Yep. Sounds great. Okay. Thanks again. And thanks everyone for listening. Really appreciate you being out there.
And thank you all for listening. This was such a fun conversation. If you enjoyed it as much as I do, please consider becoming a patron or patroness of the show. You can find the link to do so at patreon.com/writermothermonster, or just by going to writermothermonster.com, and you'll find other options for supporting the show. I appreciate you so much. And thank you again, Jessica, for joining us. And we will see you all next week.